Hi all and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. We've got news and views around the world. I may throw in a few Q&A to catch up. And then we've got some extensive intel which ties in to real extensive op-ed pieces that will complete the show tonight. You ready? Right, I'm going to skip the links tonight as we need to get as far in as possible. We're going to go straight into the news. And the first piece is a Democratic Party political consultant was arrested in Little Rock, Arkansas. Oh my, you all know who resides close to there. In a federal child pornography charge that the authorities have revealed, and a sealed criminal complaint was filed on Friday against Harold Moody Jr. and unsealed on Tuesday. Moody, the former chairman of the Pulaski County Democratic Party for 2 years and communications director for the Democratic Party of Arkansas from July 2015 through February 17, was caught during a federal investigation into child exploitation. Now, according to an affidavit filed in the Eastern District of Arkansas, Mr. Moody is accused of using a video conference application to view and share videos of adults raping children. We'll hear more on that later. According to Arkansas Online, Moody pleaded innocent on Tuesday in a U.S. District Court in Little Rock and waived his right to a bond hearing. And a spokesman for the U.S. Attorney for the District of Arkansas said Moody will remain in federal custody. And Moody has since left his role as the Democratic State Party spokesman when current chairman Michael John Gray was elected. And this is according to the current communications director for the Democrat Party. Washington, next. Following the state confirmation of William P. Barr to the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, TikTok, is planning to exit the Department of Justice next Friday, according to 3 DOJ officials who are familiar with the plans and ongoing conversations inside the department. Rosenstein, who this show said in December of 2017 would be one of those that will go, remember, initially planned to stay at the DOJ for several weeks further to ensure a smooth transition to his successor. No, he didn't. He wanted to delay things further. Jeffrey Rosen, who has took over, however, he is quietly working to exit the DOJ next Friday, which is tomorrow, after a scathing interview was given to 60 Minutes by former FBI Director Andrew McCabe. Another one. Mr. McCabe is scheduled to air on Sunday, I think this was last Sunday, and said that Mr. Rosenstein considered invoking the 25th Amendment to oust President Trump, in addition to possibly recording the Commander-in-Chief, directly contradicting a forceful denial issued months earlier by Rosenstein. Rosenstein also signed a FISA warrant against former Trump advisor Carter Page, something President Trump has heavily criticized him for. And over a 2-year period, Rosenstein repeatedly refused to comply with requests from House Republicans for documents related to the Page FISA warrant and the Russian investigation in general. A group of scientists around the world have now called for a ban on the development, it's not in development, they're already there, of weapons controlled by artificial intelligence. It says that autonomous weapons may malfunction, they already have, in unpredictable ways and kill innocent people. They already have in many thousands. And ethics experts also argue that it is a moral step too far for AI systems to kill without any human intervention. Now, these comments were made at the American Association for Advancement of Science meeting, which took place in Washington, D.C. last week, and the Human Rights Watch is one of 89 non-governmental organisations from 50 countries that have formed the campaign to stop the killer robots and to press for an international treaty on it. Now, among those leading efforts for the worldwide ban is Mary Wareham. We are not talking about walking, talking Terminator robots that are about to take over the world. What we are concerned about is much more imminent. Conventional weapon systems with autonomy, and they are beginning to creep in. Drones are the obvious example, but there are military aircraft that take off, fly and land on their own. No one to talk then, you see. Robotic sentries that can identify movement, and these are precursors to autonomous weapons. Now, Ryan Gariepy, Chief Technological Officer of ClearPath Robotics, also backs the ban proposal. His company takes military contracts, but it has denounced AI systems for warfare and stated it would not develop them. When they fail in unpredictable ways, he said. The Indonesian president has popped up again. He made many controversial statements last year. President Duterte, and in his latest outburst, he has vowed to, quote, eradicate all traces of Rothschild's family financial criminality from the Philippines. Good move. Announcing that he will no longer respond to pressure or financial blackmail from the US government or Rothschild's controlled global banking institutions. The president, who claims to have killed several cartel bosses with his own hands, is not one to be bullied, as we all know, and he has now set his sights on cleaning up the financial corruption in his country and promising them to drive them out like the scavengers that they are. Now, before Duterte assumed the office of president, the Philippines was suffering from the effects of the IMF, World Bank and UN imposed austerity programs and privatization that exploited its people and also its resources. A common theme, as regular listeners to THI will know. And it's also one of Asia's most corrupt and troubled nations, though the Filipino people, through strong showings of popular resistance over a period of years, were able to curb some of the most rampant crony corruption. Many of the shackles imposed by these Rothschilds-controlled institutions still remained. Now, back in 2016, after warning those involved in the narcotics trade that it's either you kill me or I kill you, this was done by the president, an astonishing 1,007,153 narcotics criminals surrendered to the government, and 73 government officials were arrested for involvement in the illegal drug trade. Billions of dollars worth of narcotics were seized. Hello, CIA. Showing what can be done in a short time frame if the problem is tackled seriously. Now, the president is going after tax-dodging oligarchs now and multi-nation corporations who haven't paid a cent for decades. And the elites and their media empires held former regimes to ransom. Some of them have now started paying up. So he's a man of his word. And maybe Mr. Trump could do with some of his moves. So how does Duterte get away with taking on the rich and the powerful? Simple. He boasts a massive 83% popular approval rating across the country, and the oligarchs cannot use the mainstream media to destroy him because the people don't trust what the media say anymore. Oh my. Israeli forces this week opted to cut off water supply lines feeding into more than a dozen communities in the West Bank city of Hebron. In total, the changes will affect 17 Mafasea Yatta communities, where an estimated 1,500 Palestinians reside. And the move on Wednesday has largely been criticised by locals as yet another Israeli measure to force Palestinians away from their homes in order to expand settlements. Now, a 2009 Amnesty International report on Palestinian access to water supplies notes that Palestinian consumption in the occupied Palestinian territories is about 70 litres per day per person, well below the 100 litres daily recommended use by the World Health Organization, which is a misnomer in and of itself. Whereas the Israeli daily per capita consumption is about 300 litres per person, about 4 times as much. And the stark reality of this unequal system is that today, more than 40 years after Israel occupied the West Bank, some 180 to 200,000 Palestinians living in rural communities there have no access to running water. And even in towns and villages which are connected to the water network, the taps often run dry, according to the report. Now, more recently, a 2018 United Nations report found that at least 1.9 million Palestinians experience or are at risk of conflict and violence, displacement and denial of access to livelihoods, amongst other threats. And the most vulnerable Palestinians are currently denied or restricted in their access to essential services such as water and also healthcare. Now, news of the water lines being closed off came on the same day that Israeli forces destroyed a recently reconstructed road that connected Kiryat ad-Daib to Mafasea Yatta, which is in the south of Hebron. And that road provided Palestinian farmers the ability to access farmlands and also residential areas. More later. US President Donald Trump this week issued an angry response after a TV interview on Sunday alleged that officials had held discussions to have him removed. Trump tweeted of illegal and treasonous behaviour and also an illegal coup attempt. And in the interview, ex-FBI Chief Andrew McCabe said talks had been held in 2017 about invoking a clause that can remove the president as being deemed unfit. Well, the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman has vowed to investigate the claims, and Lindsey Graham said the claims were an attempted bureaucratic coup. In a series of tweets on Monday morning, he condemned so many lies by now disgraced FBI director, Andrew McCabe. He was fired for lying, and now his story gets even more deranged. He and Rosenstein, who was hired by the then Attorney General Jeff Sessions, another one who we warned would go bye-bye, looked like they were planning a very illegal act and got caught. Mr. Trump added there's a lot of explaining to do to the millions of people who had just elected a president who they really like and has done a great job for them with the military, vets, economy and much more. This was the illegal and treasonous insurance policy in full action, he said. A court in the Maldives has ordered the country's former president to be arrested on money laundering charges. It's racking up these former presidents and current presidents and prime ministers who have been done on money laundering, and it's likely much more. Now, reports that Yamin Abdul Gayoom was ordered detained by a court after prosecutors argued that he could potentially tamper with witnesses in the case if he was released. Investigators reportedly found $1 million in his bank account related to a deal to lease public islands to real estate developers. 2 current cabinet ministers were also suspended by the Maldives' current president, Ibrahim Mohamed Solih, after related payments were discovered in their accounts also. Now, the state prosecutor argued that Yameen had contacted 2 witnesses in the case and offered them money in exchange for their silence. Now, Mr. Yameen has reportedly countered that, saying he does not know the witnesses set to testify against him and that he did not know about the $1 million transferred to his bank account. Really. Former President Mohamed Nasheed, whose conviction under Yameen's rule was overturned last year, told the Associated Press that the country will attempt to reduce its $3 billion debt with China, arguing that some of the money went to Yameen's illegal schemes. It's all linked. Now, following an earlier piece I did on this show about pricing people out of America, out of homes, and also rent, also in Canada and also in the UK. Here's a further example. This is a global issue. A person by the name of Geraldine Hines, which I'm almost sure is a friend of mine's sister, it all fits, back in the UK, is panicking about the future. The 63-year-old has been trying to buy an apartment ever since she was evicted from the home she rented for 32 years, when it was bought by Chinese investors 2 years ago. I want some security in case the same thing happens again, says Miss Hines, who's originally from Ireland. Now, she earns a modest salary as an English teacher in Greece, while her Greek husband's monthly pension was cut from €1,500, which is about $1,700, down to €500 during the country's economic crisis. Now, you manage your social security payments being cut 2/3. Not good. Of course, this all happened in Greece back in 2010. When we were evicted, there were still apartments selling nearby for €100,000, and now I can't find anything under €250,000, which is roughly $300,000 ballpark anyway. And she's going on that they're being priced out. These are Chinese and Russian oligarch prices, not the average Greek people. Now, of course, Greece's financial crisis started a decade ago and shrank the country's economy by more than 25% in the following years. But we're pleased to hear that there are finally some signs of improvement over there, perhaps not in the house prices. And the property market that was once completely dead is back on the rise again, except house prices are increasing too much. All designed for certain buyers, that's why, so they control the whole market. And the boom appears to be driven by a controversial golden visa scheme in which non-EU citizens receive residency and free movement in the EU Schengen zone, as it's called, in exchange for investing in property. See how it works now? And the worry is that foreign investors are benefiting while ordinary Greeks miss out. A bit like what happened on the whole of the east coast of America and Canada, is it not? And this type of program is the same as the program ran in America, known as the EB-5 visa. Next few pieces before we fit in a couple of Q&A will be of no surprise, because we've warned about these type of actions previously. The editor and publisher of a local paper in Alabama, which is key, is under fire for penning an editorial calling for mass lynchings by the Ku Klux Klan, and the opinion piece ran in his print-only newspaper, the Democratic Reporter. Go figure. Goodloe Sutton confirmed on Tuesday he said Democrats were going to raise taxes and that the KKK should hang them and raid Washington, D.C. Alabama lawmakers have called for Sutton to resign. Now, the KKK is one of the oldest so-called white supremacy groups in America. That was formed just after the Civil War, which I documented in a recent piece. And that group was behind many of the lynchings, rapes and violent attacks on what is assumed African Americans, but may actually be indigenous Americans in the 1900s and the 1800s. Now, the editorial began garnering attention online after students from Auburn University in Alabama tweeted photographs of the article. Mr. Sutton could not be immediately reached for comment on the matter, which is indicative. Essentially, he just lit the fuse. Now, Mr. Sutton was once a celebrated journalist, commended for his ethics by other news outlets, including the New York Times and also the American Journalism Review. And a short editorial piece published without a byline on February the 14th was entitled "Klan Needs to Ride Again. Time for the Ku Klux Klan to night ride again." Now, a lot of people won't get that reference. The Night Riders were set up the week after the Ku Klux Klan. Just an offshoot of the same group. Now, I did that piece back in December the 20th and pointed out the links. But why would a celebrated journalist come up with this piece at this time? Why in Alabama? It makes no sense. But the gist of it is this show, or my December the 20th show, on Dane Calloway, and also some QAnons have been piecing together the links between the KKK and the Democrats is why. That's why they've done this piece. So let's write a controversial piece written that separates the two groups, and that's the whole gist of what this guy's wrote. A deliberate distraction piece that they've used so often. But that article also rewrites history, as the KKK was formed in the 1860s and was against Jews, originally not blacks. It was also against the Republicans, as my piece on December the 20th show pointed out. Why? Because the KKK were the democratic, militaristic and defence arm of that party. Essentially, this piece is a deliberate think tank group piece designed to distance two connected dots and separate them to a gullible and naive public. Again, now you should all start to see how they work. Twist and spin everything to diffuse and confuse. And hopefully many of you now are beginning to see the patterns and learn to connect the dots yourselves. But essentially this piece is a compliment to those who exposed the links of the KKK and the Democrats. And all they've done is try to create the distance between the two when there is none. Another common theme that happens all too often. The summit of Central European leaders in Israel has been cancelled because of an Israel-Poland row over the Holocaust. Poland withdrew after being angered by comments from Israeli leaders about Polish complicity in the Holocaust. Really? In particular, Israel's acting foreign minister Yisrael Katz used the phrase Poles imbibe anti-Semitism with their mother's milk. Nazi Germany murdered 6 million Jews, mostly in Poland, and some Poles did collaborate with the Nazis, he said. And he went on, remarks were racist and unacceptable to the Polish people. And the Polish Prime Minister, Mr. Morawiecki, said there were also Polish fury at the Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for saying Poles cooperated with the Germans during the Holocaust. He also stated that 6 million Polish citizens died, 6 million Polish citizens died in World War II. I figured again. And he stated there were about 3 million who were Jews. And yet, on the signs in the concentration camps, it says 130,000 now. Oops. One loss is enough. Now, the meeting, which was hosted by Israel, was meant to bring together the four-nation Visegrad group: Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary and Slovakia, the Aryan group. But on Monday, Israel said the three prime ministers attending without Poland would have bilateral meetings with Mr. Netanyahu. But like I said, this is a common theme. It's gone on for the last 30 or 40 years. Every single time there is a meeting to thrash stuff out, someone says something controversial that disrupts or cancels the meeting. Or they deliberately fire rockets at their own people, disrupts other meetings between Palestine and Israel. How many more times does this have to happen before world leaders begin to see through this illusion? The leaders who are operating, and they are operating, I'll make that distinction, they are operating under the banner of Israel, have no interest in peace, or to be fair, or interested in humanity, only their insane program and humanity-destroying religious dogma, more of which will be revealed later in the op-ed pieces. Let's see if we can throw a few Q&A in before we get to the real meat of the show. Where are we? So the person who asked in emails, am I human? Yes, I am. 100%. And who disagrees with my opinion of the mother should have the choice of whether to keep the child or not. Fine. Like I said, that's your opinion and that's mine. But we're talking about sovereignty and less control. Is it not conflicting where we're deciding what somebody else does with their body? That is the whole gist of my stance. Nikolai Levashov spoke about, this is probably maybe the final portion of the 40 odd questions one member sent in. Levashov spoke about his successful efforts to clean up the radiation at Chernobyl, which is correct. And according to the person who wrote it, that resonated with me immediately and powerfully, and along with his brief article on PSI, which he said I should mention to my listeners, made her ponder. Also, his article on PSI points the way we can begin to collectively make a difference. Absolutely. But perhaps the person who sent the email doesn't realise that it was this show that introduced Levashov to the West. We were the first in the Western Hemisphere to cover that material outside of Russia. So now you know. Now, next portion, you do mention superpowers in your ground and shielding piece. This would be helpful for all of us, as we could get practice harmonizing with one another as a group. Isn't this one of the reasons why humans were created? So we could pilot craft with our minds, and we could go from theory to practicality before our very eyes. Absolutely. That's what this show is all about, getting people to tap in to their latent abilities, not have others fixing it for us, whoever those others may be. If everyone did it, like I said, the world's problems go away overnight. If everyone acts in personal responsibility, the world's problems go away overnight. It doesn't take violence or wars or treaties or acts or even a pen. Where are we next? One huge benefit, as I see it, is that we will get first-hand experience of what it feels like to join together for the common good. Yeah, absolutely. But the peace doesn't start with me. It starts with you all. The tools are all there. It's all on Think Different, of different things that everyone can work on themselves. You know, I already have some of those abilities, so it's not about me. It's about teaching everyone how to use it, and use it responsibly as well. Right. You've indicated a warning on all banks. Correct. However, most of us have small businesses and use local banks and some credit cards. What the heck can we do to continue our stores? Well, rest assured, everything is being done so that there's hopefully a smooth transition. We can't control everything. We've more than done our part. It's up to others to do their part. And that's where things tend to stall out. Not from our end, it's from the other side. They have to implement certain things, and certain things are taking a bit longer than they should do. Others, it's understandable. But we've done absolutely everything to keep things flowing as best as possible. You know, at the trust, if it wasn't for the trust, this country would have collapsed in March last year. There was no money. There's none now. So all the businesses would have gone. And it's all about keeping yourself going and riding the wave, which is not easy in the current economic circumstances, which are far worse than is put out, as you'll find out later in an op-ed piece. You know, but you have to keep going. Maybe cut back is the way to go. What you need, not what you greed, is the way forward. Have you ever commented on Robert David Steele? Several times. The man's not ex-CIA, he is CIA. And rogue elements as well. Where are we next? If more intelligent beings locked genetically sensitized resonators, humans, into a giant Mobius loop life force harvester for aeons, feeding on our suffering and pain, from a certain point of view, what they have built was a bomb. That is the only justification I can think for quarantining us with the psychos. No, they're trapped. These are all contained in the must listen to shows. This is why at the beginning of each show I ask people to listen to them all, maybe more than once. You know, the quarantine is both a protection for us and to trap certain ones into the system and hopefully correct them one way or the other, whatever means that takes. Their plans was to smash the planet and flee. Well, the ones that wanted to flee can no longer do so. So they've got to fix the mess as well. Now, there'll always be psychopaths, but the key is getting the minions to step down. And whilst that's in a closed system, that's far better than opening it up and letting more psychopaths come in with advanced weaponry and wiping us all out. Because as the mindset is of some of them currently, that's exactly what will happen. All that rage at once would blow a hole in the real universe. Am I onto something here? No. Is this a simulation harvester 2.0 or more of a dissipator, really? Well, they do have plans for their virtual reality world to replace the loop matrix, and some of them are helping them rather well with that, with the overuse of technology. Buddhism as a philosophy rather than a religion has many reasonable practices for mindfulness and compassionate action in the world. Do you have any insights and info on where the ancient Buddhist knowledge was drawn from? Given the region, I would suggest it was linked with the Rus. That whole region was Rus. I think that's where it goes back to. The Buddha gained enlightenment from the contemplation of the mental planes and has much to teach us about being centered and compassionate to all beings. Fine, I agree with that. We need many people operating from the mental planes. At the moment, there are very few. I'm wondering, whenever funds are released, will there be possibilities for us that are in our late 50s and early 60s that have been out of the workforce for many years due to many different circumstances to start work again, so that we'll be able to make a living and pay our own way? I think this is a big worry on a lot of people's minds. Well, I've said before, the regular members of THI will be some of the first to be funded, because I want all of you working for the People's Club. That's the object of it. And because you've been brought up in the People's Club way, and then you can go out and teach others to operate in the same way or similar. So age doesn't really matter to me. I'm in my late 50s myself, so it doesn't really matter age if you think you can contribute or you would like to contribute in what mostly I'm hoping will be a paying role. Some of it might be where you want to just chip in a few hours here and there, whatever it may be. But the idea is for THI to expand out, and the only way I can do that is by employing as many THI people as possible. Can somebody help me find out if I have a parasite or I've been flagged for walk-ins? Yes, they can, but it's not easy, and generally involves a lot of people who say they can do it when the reality is they can't. You mentioned that members have done a lot of work around drink and drugs, and I want to find out what they did to help re-establish human sovereignty in the body. Well, there's a lot of people in the MeWe chat who can talk you through that, including myself. THI has got many people off pharmaceuticals, many people off long-term drink and drug addiction, and also prevented a number of suicides privately. This is what we're all about. It's not just about the intel or the hammer knowledge. It's about helping people. Let me see. Find something. How does a person know when they found the real self? Only you can answer that. There's an inner knowing. Is Source helping out with the process? Yes. The more you reach out, the more you gain. The more you find the real self. The more the inner knowing, the more the connection with Source. Are there any sources you can recommend we can research to discover more? Or where are we? No, we'll go back up a bit further. How is it you have become aware, accurately informed of the many topics that you've covered over the years in your shows, be it history, esoteric, spirituality? And is there any sources you can recommend we can research to discover more about the information ourselves, either as truth masquerading as fiction or by any means? Well, as I've said many times, I don't read books, never have done. I read the internet occasionally, through the 90s and the first decade of the 2000s. It was fairly extensive, of acquiring vast volumes of knowledge. In the last 6 or 7 years, it's been more of a case the information comes to me rather than I go to it. And that's what happens when you expand your consciousness out to unlimited boundaries. It just keeps going. So the information suddenly comes to you. It may come through in a download to you, where you hear some words or a sentence. It may come in a song. It may come in video form that you can see in your head. There's many different ways. But certain things come to me at certain times. There are times when I do have to go searching, but then I realise I'm wasting my time because I'm just not ready yet to deliver or receive that information. That's how it works. I hope that helps. But yes, the Russia with Love and also the Demons and Magic shows were triggering to the person who asked that question. They were meant to trigger. Is Anne really dead? Yes. September the 4th, 2016 at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It was a Sunday. Some person wants to know if the Manor World Holding Trust could build a poor man's time machine for everyone. I think we have far more pressing things to deal with than time machines. Someone sent in another load of questions, 10. I'm not going to have time for them. Another one asking the same thing: how can I get the Manor World Holding Trust funding to build a time machine for everyone, since global youths are addicted to video games and interactive digital lessons? Manor World Holding Trust could fund the transitional education programs for future teacher and student lessons, shouldn't the trust? Like a sample tour of Alexandria, the Great Library of Alexandria. In the future, yes. Some of those things are already planned, but there's far more pressing things that have to be dealt with now than that. We have a lot of people suffering. My mother died 2 weeks ago. I'm inheriting much needed money and the banks are crashing. I'm all in with the truth of the Manor World Holding Trust and believe in you and totally trust your intel. How can I protect money I would inherit? Well, I'm not a financial advisor, but it depends on how much it is really. If it's sufficient to house under the bank of the mattress, I would do so. It's not like you're going to get a vast volume of interest, is it? You know, if the banks go down, and it's looking more and more likely, the danger is you may not get access to your money again. Given the January the 1st 2015 rule, should the banks collapse in and declare an emergency, all accounts will become ownership of the bank. And if you think the FDIC is going to bail you out, they're bankrupt also. They won't. You've seen what happened to the people in Iceland when they collapsed it there. People lost hundreds of thousands. Did they get it back? Not really. So sometimes the bank of mattress may be the best bet. If it's larger amounts, then maybe look at buying some smaller houses like fixer-uppers and either sell them on or rent them out. So at least then you have your money tied into a property. That may be something else you can look into. It has come to my attention that President Trump has vetoed 0 bills since becoming president. Is Congress doing that great of a job that President Trump signs all the bills sent to his desk into law? Strategy is all I'll say to that. Strategy. Right, I think we've had enough of that. Apologies for those who I haven't answered. They're all still on the list. I'll eventually get round to them, but we're having to cover that much these days. I don't have the time, and we've got a lot of material coming up in this show. Oh boy. Let's have a couple of songs before we get into the intel. Hey all, and welcome back to the second hour. People are people. We're going to find some people are not people later in this, or not our type of people, shall we say. But first we're going to go into the intel, and the Los Angeles incidents of helicopters in sequence going down the main streets there, and other events that have unfolded in that place. And as per usual, the internet is awash with misdirection of what really took place and a load of bullshit, which is a common theme. Now, what really took place is, following the deep state and the SSP moves, who are the SSP who are operating from an island off the coast of Seattle, they began activating more MS-13 gangs to cause and instigate further trouble in California. So ICE stepped in and was instructed to call in the National Guard. That is what you saw. And that was to head off some of the carnage that those groups were endeavouring to create in that region. Now, I suspect that region will become rather hostile and develop certain created disaster events in the near future. Heads up to all the people of that whole coastline, not just California. For the last 2 days, the United States Treasury has been in a meeting with the Federal Reserve as they attempt to act and call upon the $2.8 quadrillion of bonds owed to the Treasury by the Federal Reserve. Now, things are heating up between the Treasury and the Fed, and the Treasury is saying to the Fed, pay up now. And the Fed is saying that it needs time to liquidate assets. Except what assets are they referring to? The Fed has no assets left. None. Zero. And providing some do their jobs, common theme again, and also some keep their nerve, this will be one that won't be too big to fail. The reality is the Fed is yet again, they are stalling under the guise of liquidate assets, which translates to waiting on fake Chinese elders to bail us out of a problem with a fake RV. That will never take place. If we get more on that, I will update. On January the 31st, the show I did, I gave a warning to Mr. Trump that he needs to start spitting out in public or on tweets the above facts, which was highlighting a number of discretions and attempts on his life and various other things that have types of skullduggery that's gone on, or the treasonous, I warned, the treasonous turds will swamp him. Stand up and speak out, I said. Enough, have your back. Defensive tweets are fine. We need attacking tweets now, not speeches. And I warned he was losing the media war, no matter how fake they are. And it was time for him to call the above out. 18 days later, Trump wrote the biggest abuse of power and corruption scandal in our history, and it's much worse than we thought. Andrew McCabe, FBI, admitted to plotting a coup, government overthrow, when he was serving in the FBI before he was fired for lying and leaking. Quote unquote. Coincidence? Well, you can all make your own minds up on that. But a further message to Mr. Trump. Next one, throw in the missile attempt last summer by the SSP and name them. Then drop the Capitol building 9/11 coup involving Pelosi, the Black Dragon Group, and also Eric Prince. Get Davos out of the administration. She smacks of insider to me, and get rid of Mnuchin like now. Who cares if he's their latest chosen one? The man is a treasonous snake. More about Mnuchin later. James Woods, the real James Woods, chimed in. If these actions were directed against a sitting Democrat president, this would be a Watergate level story in the national media by now. Absolutely. Was there an attempt by an acting DAG to weaponize the Department of Justice in a presidential coup d'etat? Of course. It's exactly what took place. And this underlines the depth of the system against the people. It involves all the media and elements in the government, the Pentagon, CIA, FBI, NSA, DHS, the Supreme Courts, all the lower courts, judges and lawyers, of which over 3/4 of Congress are also lawyers, which is also against the original Constitution, as the bar is a title of nobility or representing a foreign power. And it ropes in all the people known as famous in sports, business, film, TV shows. They all sold out for their illusion of fame and lots of pieces of paper and vacuous materialistic trinkets. We'll have more on them later also. Next item. You will get to hear of the Manor World Holding Trust real soon, as they are preparing an all-out mainstream media assault on the group to prevent any of the public getting on board with it. We've made too many inroads, you see. This will involve all the top media, as they have already made attempts to contact us this week to do discrediting pieces on the trust and also all members of the team. The alt media agents will throw their pieces in also, and any doubts you had about me revealing the ones not working for the people, I will suspect will be laid bare soon. Previous attempts via fake rip-off reports that shouted fraud but left no details of what that fraud was will not and have not worked. Recent attempts by David Ray on his whistleblower site to throw Manor World Holding Trust and Kim again as some sort of fraud, again with no details, have also failed. So then he attempted to massage my ego and saying I'm too good for Kim and that I should work together with him. That also failed. And this is one of several attempts since last summer to get me away from Kim and suggest they're kind of concerned of the two of us working together, does it not? Kind of a backhanded compliment to me in many ways. But it also validates why I have put myself at risk and also my life on hold to work directly with Kim and the team. We're having a big effect. That's why they're attacking. Next piece. Part of the reasons behind the media war launched on us is privately we at the Manor World Holding Trust have made giant strides in the many things we are involved in exposing the trafficking enterprise, not only with the wall, but other avenues also, which kind of shuts up those who think we are all about the money and the trust funds. We're not. We've also made giant inroads in the child sex trafficking and pedophile rings, and high-profile people in the media are all involved in. This goes way beyond NXIVM or Comet Ping Pong. Way beyond. It involves most of the high-profile people, either coerced or not. And quite frankly, if all of them are arrested, there will be literally no so-called famous personalities left on TV. Or very little. Which is why we need a new TV channel and get real people, not pedophile people, not corrupt people spitting out packs of lies, real people who are not corrupt spitting out the real truth, not the plethora of script-written lies, distortions and a total BS we've been fed since 1923 and CBS, who started the propaganda machine. Now, having read the 1934 Telecommunications Act in full recently, you will be staggered to know that all bandwidth is owned by the US Military Inc., who are subsequently ran by the Rothschilds. There will be further connecting dots on that later, but the phones, cable, radio and TV frequencies and communications are all owned by the military. All of it was created and designed to be a propaganda machine. And this is what we're dealing with. The head of CNN is now going to run a hit piece on us using his PR, public relations, to cover up another PR, pedophile ring, which he owns. Watch this space. Game on, Mr. Turner. Next item. AMC Theatres, one of the largest theatre companies in the worldwide, was bought by the Chinese several years ago. The Shanghai Film Fund is now funding 70% of movies that are produced in Hollywood. If a film refuses funding from Shanghai Film Fund, then AMC Theatre will refuse to show the film. fact how it works. These rogue Chinese elements have basically taken control of USA filmmaking and also Hollywood. So in essence, they are promoting and feeding the pedophile network via the triads in San Francisco and also the new Hollywood in Vancouver, British Columbia. Now, only second to the Mexico-American border in human trafficking entering America is the port in San Francisco, California. It is known that the port there, since the days of the Opium Wars, have been controlled by the Black Dragon Society, which is comprised of the Kuomintang out of China, which runs the triads, and also the Bush family. Now, the Bush family has not been in charge of the Black Dragon of North America. There's also a Black Dragon of China for quite a while now. It was taken over by Cheney until bulldozers kind of messed things up a bit. And the recent head was Pelosi, hence her recent trip or attempted trip to Afghanistan. And this is the same family group that Eric Prince works for. The clowns have now gone back to Obama, who is now the Black Dragon for North America, after Pelosi failed her takeover the president role by the end of January in a mass 9/11 style event in the Capitol building, whilst Mr. Trump was delivering the original State of the Union speech that was cancelled. Pelosi, of course, would have been out of the country at the time. Final intel piece, which is technically a news item, but it ties into the just mentioned piece and will roll into the later op-ed pieces. This starts the dot connecting. YouTube is in damage control mode after several large companies, including Disney, Nestle, McDonald's and Epic Games, had to pull ads in response to a report accusing the platform of harbouring a pedophile ring which was hiding in plain sight. Multiple major corporations have temporarily suspended all YouTube advertising after learning their ads were playing before videos featuring minors as young as 5 performing sexualized versions of everyday activities. The advertisers were informed by Wired on Wednesday that their ads were playing before videos similar to the clips highlighted by blogger Matt Watson's video expose, which was posted earlier this week, and most responded with shock. Are you ready? Disney is in it deep. The original Disney crew, before Walt Disney's death, were not involved in pedophilia. It was the subsequent leaders of Disney that took over that company. The current CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, was born to a Jewish family in New York. Take note. Former CEO was Michael Eisner, who was born to an affluent secular Jewish family in Mount Cisco, New York. Eisner also brought in Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was also born in New York to a Jewish family. Following a takeover against Eisner attempt in the 1990s, Roy Disney, along with Stanley Gold, Mr. Gold, who was born to a Jewish family, this time in California, and Bob Iger also moved Disney to Shanghai. That coup against Mr. Eisner failed, and Bob Iger took over. He then moved Disney to Shanghai. Now, Mr. Iger co-chaired a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign on August the 22nd, 2016. Iger was also named to Mr. Trump's Strategic and Policy Forum on December the 2nd, 2016, but he resigned from Trump's advisory council. Resigned means F-I-R-E-D. On June the 1st, citing Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. Mr. Iger, back in 2012, June 2012 to be precise, was presented with the Ambassador for Humanity Award by the USC Shoah Foundation Institute for Visual History and Education, the Institute's highest honour. Who presented it? Steven Spielberg, also born to a Jewish family. Then we have another who is a head of a film industry that has been exposed recently, Harvey Weinstein. Harvey was, not surprisingly, born in New York to Jewish parents. Let's throw in another one, Jeffrey Epstein, born in New York, born to Jewish parents. The Bronfman sisters involved in NXIVM, born into a Jewish family. Their father was the leader of the World Jewish Congress, who said in his book, The Making of a Jew, he explained first he called for the release of all so-called prisoners of Zion. Remember that for a later piece. The Jews imprisoned for expressing a desire to emigrate to Israel. And Bronfman also wanted freedom for Jews in the Soviet Union to practice their religion. Again, keep that in the back of your mind, it will come clear later. And finally, he called for freedom of Soviet Jews to learn Hebrew, which was forbidden at the time. Keep note of that, you'll need it for later. Those statements will become much clearer in the later pieces. Anthony Weiner, born in New York, born to Jewish parents. Keith Raniere, born in New York. Where did NXIVM start? New York. Who is the guy in the US Treasury blocking the Manor World Holding Trust funds in support of the Jewish-based banker family, the Rothschilds? Stephen Mnuchin, who was, funny enough, born in New York, and funny again, born to Jewish parents. Who ran the Federal Reserve? Born in New York, born to Jewish parents, Alan Greenspan. Who dictated foreign policy during the 9/11 phase and operation, and took part in the Project for North American Century? Richard Perle, born in New York, born to Jewish parents. What building and organisation thinks it runs the world? The UN. Where is it situated? New York. Who runs it? The Jewish element. And perhaps now you'll start to see a picture. If you don't know now, you will see later. But please don't be hating on all Jewish people. I'll make that quite clear later in the show. So these parasites took over the Disney parks and the Disney brand. That gives so much magic to children and adults alike. I know, I've been there several dozen times. It's a magical world. And turned it into a monstrous organisation, riddled with symbology, letter M's everywhere, for Moloch, as in Mickey Mouse or Minnie Mouse. Subliminal advertisements on the rides and in the queues, allowing known rogue ETs walking amongst us in the parks. I know, I've seen them. Install underground tunnels in Disney World, Florida, where children go missing, and the tunnels are rumoured to be leading to a creepy small town around the Apopka Vineland Road area, where an old lady sits on the porch watching and monitoring all who goes into that 2 to 3 block village. and also rumoured that the tunnels go to a mysterious military base in the heart of Orlando, owned by Lockheed Martin. All of that has to be brought to light and brought down, and the whole thing repackaged back to its original intention, which is entertainment and enlightenment for the children. Of course, Nestle are famous for their quote, "It's not a human right to have clean water." McDonald's also mentioned, apart from serving shite replicas of food containing all kinds of things, including human fetuses, use what as their logo? The clown. That is, and was, a subliminal message to the children who experienced those in their sleep. As for the Epic Games, all video games are designed to change your brain pattern into chaos or worse. More subliminal programming. It lowers your attention spans and is creating for you the virtual reality loop they want you to jump into next after exiting the loop matrix. These monstrous bastards have destroyed the innocence of childhood, make no two ways about it, and led the children into an adult world riddled with abuse, self-doubts and trauma, all to fulfill a satanic agenda that has duped many peoples and their fake borders known as countries. We have an obligation, all of us, to rout out this evil and give the children a chance to grow. You want to ignore it? To those who do, go and fuck yourselves. You are a blight to and of humanity, and are accessories to it at this point if you choose. Hi all and welcome back. We ain't finished yet. We're going to start connecting some dots shortly anyway, probably after the next music piece. We're going to go into some op-ed pieces now, which will lead into probably what's the main portion of tonight's show. And the first one is the California problem. We mentioned a bit in the intel, and I have to say thanks to one of the QAnons for digging this up. 4 families, 3 generations, all working together to control everything. The Brown family, the governor, Pelosi, no surprise, Gavin Newsom and the Getty family. Now I highlight this because A, it connects dots, and B, for the public to see how easy it is to gain control of a whole state or region. This is how the system does things. Then they get the police, the local councillors, the judges and the court systems to protect them. But it all starts with a few people. So 4 families control 40 million people in one state. Like Texas, the Texas Rangers, the oil fields, the high finance, all controlled by the Bushes. Texas has 29 million people, and they're all largely controlled by just one family. Next piece. We did Michael, our webmaster extraordinaire, has been putting some of the op-ed pieces up, and the clowns at YouTube decided to block the Tomorrow Belongs to Me piece, which is about the Hitler Youth. And you'd be surprised not surprised at some of the countries, but surprised at how many countries that they've decided to block it. Austria, no surprise there. Belgium, even less. Bulgaria, Switzerland, no surprise. Cyprus, Czechia, Germany, Denmark, Estonia, Spain, Finland, France, the UK, French Guiana, Guadeloupe, Greece, Croatia, Hungary, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Latvia, Martinique, Malta, New Caledonia, Holland, French Polynesia, Poland, Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, Portugal, Reunion, Romania, Sweden, Slovenia, Slovakia, French Southern Territories, Wallis and Futuna, and also Mayotte. Oh my, they don't like truth getting out, do they? That piece will be corrected and put back. It may have already been done. Now the next item, which I referenced earlier, about the state of the economy, the real state of the economy. And US retail sales recorded their biggest drop in more than 9 years in December, as receipts fell across the board, suggesting a sharp slowdown in economic activity, which began at the end of 2018. No money left. The Commerce Department said on Thursday retail sales tumbled 1.2%, which is the largest decline since September of 2009, when they suggested that the economy was emerging from the recession. No, we never. We just never did. And December online internet sales, non-store retailers, tumbled nearly 4%, the biggest drop ever. Core Site Research released an outlook of 2019 store closures on Wednesday, saying there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and according to the global market research firm's report, just 6 weeks into 2019, US retailers have announced 2,187 closings, which is up 23% compared to last year. Now, these closings include 749 Gymboree stores, 251 Shopko stores, and 94 Charlotte Russe locations. And the US discount retailer Payless Shoe Source Inc. plans to close all of its approximately 2,300 stores when it files for bankruptcy later this month for the second time in as many years. Now, bankruptcies also are continuing to rise at a rapid pace, with the number of filings in the first 6 weeks of 2019 already at 1/3 of the whole of last year's total within the first 6 weeks. More than 7 million Americans are 90 days or more behind on their vehicle loans at the end of 2018. That was released by the Federal Reserve, New York, no doubt. That's more than 1 million higher than the peak in 2010, as the country, again, as they're saying, was recovering from the worst downturn since the Great Depression. We just never came out of it. But people are beginning to realise now that we checked into the Monetary Roach Motel that I talked about from the beginning, and there's no way out. Then the dollar is going to fall like a stone. When they find out that it's never over and it didn't work, then there's going to be nothing propping up the dollar, and it's going to drop like a stone. The price of gold is going to take off, according to certain alt media, and the recession that we're entering into, which is going to be an inflationary recession, is going to be worse than what we now call the Great Recession. This was according to the research analysts. And they said further, maybe it's taken longer than we thought it had to play out, but this is the beginning of the end. Now, obviously, this goes against what Mr. Trump is saying. but there are times when the government has to lie or use propaganda to calm the waters. And sometimes it's for our benefit, most times it's not. But I don't have those restrictions that the President has, and I will call it as it is. This country is collapsing in on itself, as I warned last week, and is fading fast due to being hijacked by globalist psychopaths, of which there is 350,000 inside our own borders. It needs to be addressed, and quickly. Next piece. The media is kind of controlling all the narrative. Nothing new there. And this is where the alt media should be pushing now for what is real. For our whole platform of what was or is the alt media. This is really our time. But what do we have? An alt media riddled with distraction pieces, fear porn, hopium, bullshittery, and almost comedic levels of disclosure that serves little or no purpose whatsoever. This is our time. This is our time for the alt media to take over the fake news. And yes, we have Q, whatever the intentions behind that are, and is exposing some things. But where are the rest of the main platforms in the alt media? Where are they? All covering Wilcock and his expanding band of blue chicken cults. Kerry Cassidy still putting out shows with old information. It's not new, Kerry. It's old. Cliff High using Microsoft, Oracle and Langley Facebook-style algorithm platforms to base his narrative on. Like that's going to work or help us. Von Wright's pushing for the globalist elite families to control the trust. Like that has ever worked. Gilliland, Cobra and others still pushing the Sara, Jassara and RVs. Drake telling listeners he's taken out people who died 2 years ago and pushing ET packages. And then we have the latest this week, the latest Buy My Book, Money Harvesting and Dark Gin Fest, because that's what it is. Contact in the Desert. Labelled the Woodstock of UFO conferences. Kind of aptly named, as Woodstock was 50 years ago. As most of the material is that old, and in most cases older. All repackaged as new disclosure. But it's not new. And no matter how much we all like discussing ETs, it's not helpful to the now, not one iota. We've already had ET disclosure. We know they are real. So why the continuous hunt to find out what you already know? Distractions, why? The world burns whilst these clowns push something we already know. And even if you didn't know, what is proving ETs exist going to do to fix this planet? Well, the ETs can come down and wave a magic wand, or in many cases, eyes and butt probes, and fix everything for us. Wrong. They won't and never will. We have to collectively get off our lazy asses and let's fix our own mess. We don't need them. ET is a saviour program that will never arrive. Whilst you wait, you do nothing, which is exactly what the paid agents involved in these conferences are doing, whether knowingly or not. Now the Contact in the Desert, all the names roll off the tongue. Wilcock, Norrie, Eisenhower, Tellinger, Gilliland, Harriman, sadly, Hancock, the Ancient Aliens Show people, Nick Pope, who works for MI56, not X, Michael Seller, Stephen Bassett, and Robert David Steele's love child and puppet, Jordan Sather. Linda Moulton Howe, Jimmy Church, and all others, all playing their game, not ours. But significantly, there are some that are missing from that lineup. Corey Goode, thrown under the bus, as this show and Randy Morgan's show stated would happen back in 2017. Remember? The Stillness in the Storm people and Teresa, gone. Kerry Cassidy, gone, as Wilcock ousted her as the main front person. And the CIA agent, standing CIA agent, Stephen Greer, friend of the Clintons, who was brought in to further control the ET narrative and then take over the whole show. But his demeanour and attitude pissed too many off, and he was dropped by the above consortium. And then you have the increasing comedic double act, Kent Dunn and Drake Bailey with the channeler. BS, all of it. None of these people are providing solutions, only distractions. We don't need distractions in the now. We need solutions for the survival of our species, is what we need. Not disclosure of entities that, you have to remember, by and large, have led us to near extinction, these same beings. Think about that for a minute. Say every president or prime minister tomorrow announces ET disclosure. What does it change? Will it feed the starving? Provide clean water to billions? Prevent child trafficking, slavery, sex trafficking, organ harvesting, ritual abuse or sacrifice, poverty, injustice or crime? Will it? No. So it has no real value, other than proving to themselves and the people in their circle that they're not nutty for believing in ETs. Why have those doubts about ourselves and our own experiences? Why do we go to those lengths of self-doubts, almost to the point of torturing ourselves? Just stop it. Now, all of those mentioned above have contributed largely in one way or another. But here they are pushing out ET disclosure in its various guises, most of which is decades old. Like the RV people, along with NESARA, GESARA and the ET packages, are pushing out hopium at best and saviour distraction programs at worst. None of it will help fix the gamut of world ills. None. And I will ask you all again to step down from your false platforms, whether paid or not, and come and really help your listeners and your followers with something that's more tangible and real. Like solutions to the world ills, with real knowledge, real ideas, and like I said, something that is tangible and not based largely in illusion. Come and join us as one, and let's all get the show on the road to freedom. Contact in the desert. Last time they did that, there was real contact in the desert between Jordan Sather and Teresa. Oops. I think they misunderstood the term. Political drama and distraction. Bit of a psychological piece again. Why are political or so-called famous people and their sexual affairs more important or relevant to your own? Trump or Clinton slept with this person or that person. Some fake talent person off the telly is sleeping around and it becomes the hot topic of discussion. It all goes viral. Everyone chipping in their points of view, and some add fake mock outrage or get all sanctimonious. I wouldn't tolerate that or do any of that. Really. But of those who reported it, and many don't, as you know, 1 in 4 men have had an extramarital affair, and 1 in 5.5 women also. And the reality is it's far higher than that figure. They're only the ones that owned up. Women in the age group 18 to 30 are more likely than men to have affairs. The gap only gets wider in men whose age is above 50, but actually increases exponentially above the age of 70, strangely. So when you consider your average bar gathering of all males or all females going out for a beer, according to the average, at least 1 or more in those groups have had an extramarital affair. And yet I fail to see why it becomes a major topic of discussion if someone on the TV does it. It's voyeurism on a massive scale, prying into other people's lives, which reflects a lack of focus on their own indiscretions, habits, mannerisms or lifestyles. And essentially this is another example of externalism. Ooh, look, that person has done wrong and has had an affair, when someone in your own circle or even yourselves have done exactly the same. You see, the cabal doesn't need Big Brother. We do that to ourselves, interfering in other people's lives. Next item, which will roll us into what's probably the main piece of tonight's show. 7 UK MPs, which is now 8, have resigned from the Labour Party in the UK in protest at Jeremy Corbyn's approach to Brexit and also anti-Semitism. They are Shuka Amuna, Luciana Berger, Chris Leslie, Angela Smith, Mike Gapes, Gavin Shuka and Anne Kofi. Now, Miss Berger seems to be the main mouthpiece for this group, which won't be a surprise why. She said Labour had become institutionally anti-Semitic and she was embarrassed and ashamed to say. Mr Corbyn said he was disappointed the MPs had felt unable to continue working for the policies that had inspired millions at the 2017 election. But Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell said the honourable thing for them to do would be to stand down as MPs and seek to return to Parliament in the by-elections. And he said Luciana Berger's decision to quit was a wake-up call for the Labour Party over anti-Semitism, saying we were slow to acknowledge we had a problem and even slower to deal with it. So who is Luciana Berger? She is a British politician who served as a Member of Parliament for Liverpool Wavertree since 2010. She was a member of the Labour Party until 2019 when she resigned to join the Independent Group. Now, as a member of the Labour Shadow Cabinet, she was Shadow Minister for Public Health and then Shadow Minister for Mental Health. Born in London to a Jewish family, and her real name is not Ms. Luciana Berger, but Goldsmith. Berger was educated at the Haberdashers' Askey School for Girls before studying at the University of Birmingham and Birkbeck, and then the University of London. So you have the reason for doing that, this piece, which is generally a news piece, is to add on to the previous piece and the pieces to follow. You have two political powerhouse countries with politicians whose only role or interest appears to be a created country that is 3,000 and 6,000 miles apart and appears to have more importance than their own country and their own people. That country has broken more UN rules than all the other countries combined, and yet gets away with it, as Britain and America veto any actions. It's broken several Geneva Convention rules, and the same two countries veto that as well. The same two countries funnel massive amounts of funds, equipment and military arms into that country at the expense of the needs of their own people. And the people who are asking in both countries is why. Surely these 7 walkout MPs in the UK have far more pressing concerns in the UK than someone calling out a country or its people that's over 3,000 miles away. How about dealing with rampant pedophilia, rampant poverty, rampant crime, rampant abuse of the system by their own peers, and nearly 3 years later cannot deliver an agreement the public voted for in Brexit? But no. These people, like so many around the world, think that criticising anything connected to Israel is the most prominent thing ever. Well, it's not. Until Israel returns the land back to the real owners based on the 1967 baseline, or preferably learns to share it, stops killing people, running apartheid programs, cutting off water, agriculture, road and limiting access for people to walk free, stops creating fake false flags on their own people, the reality is they are not interested in their own people, as World War II and a later peace will reveal. And they'll blame it on the Palestinians or the Hezbollah or some other fake group created as an illusion of an enemy, until they drastically improve its own human rights record, stops interfering in other countries, stops creating rules in other countries to criminalise any criticisms. Hello, America. Stops playing both sides of the game, stops spying on every nation, stops installing politicians and lobbyists in other countries, and also apologises for the USS Liberty incident, then that country, to use a Bush and Rumsfeld narrative, is an axis of evil and a pariah state. If that is labelled anti-Semitism, fine, then I stand accused. I'll call it the truth, and the truth never fears investigation. Something the puppets protecting that state have gone to great lengths to avoid the real truth coming out. But until the full truth is revealed, this whole planet is under threat from these parasitic entities that run that country, not the people. And everyone is under threat. None more so than the Jewish people themselves. The reality is they sold you out in World War II, and they've sold you out ever since. And make no bones about it, these people running that country will do another mass genocide on you if it fulfills their goals. Make no mistake about that. They will always blame the Arabs, the Palestinians, the Iranians, the Syrians and the Nazis. But the real problem is them all along. 70 to 90 million Russians and Slavonic Aryans, millions more in the Middle East, and everywhere else they've infiltrated. And for what? There is a reason these parasites have been thrown out of 106 countries in the last 2,000 years. The reason the same people were thrown out of the original Garden of Eden. These people are the Kali Ma descendants, and have created and wreaked havoc wherever they've gone, all based on a genocide book called the Talmud, that elevates those people above the 99% of the rest of the planet, including their so-called own people. I hope one day I will get to see all of the people of Israel rise up against the real enemy, as one day they'll find out what the real enemy is and who they are, like in America and like in Britain. The real enemies are within their own borders. It's blowing in the wind. Hi all, and welcome back. If you think what's gone before was mind-blowing enough, we have more to the end, right to the end. This will start now to connect the dots. First piece I'm going to cover is who are the heirs. It's important to get a background to what I'm going to reveal tonight. They were the originals here. And yes, they were white as a matter of reference only, not to paint a picture of superiority, but actual facts. They were packed with the extra abilities that is latent in us all. Telepathy, telekinesis, spirituality, advanced technology that was body, heart and mind based, not external like now, using what is known as the Vril energy. They had planet and interplanetary craft for travel, known as Vitmaras and Vitmanas, advanced agriculture, heightened art, creativity and ways of living way above all who followed here. They taught, and their base of operation was the Arya, which was a continent north of Russia, which is likely more commonly known as Hyperborea, when things up there were a lot more tropical based than they are now. They were teachers of the highest form of personal responsibility, nature, growth, all done in a non-violent way. They only defended, they never attacked. They went on teaching to the peoples of Rus, now known as modern-day Russia, and spread out in all directions, north, south, east and west, and encompassed 2/3 of the globe. The Rus taught the Slavonic Aryans, and it spread out across the planet with advanced building techniques that were later passed on to the peoples known as the Tartarians. They came in peace and tried to teach the tribal peoples of the day of different ways of life and living, not existing and sacrificing under the Kali Ma, with varying degrees of success. But the dark forces always fought back, and around every 13,000 years mark, as the gate out of the loop or the matrix approached, they unleashed desert creating weapons, various floods or threw rocks at our planet to prevent the peoples escaping the system and reaching the higher frequency realms many had attained back then. Not so much now, due to the interference, distraction games and their really successful divide and conquer programs. Tonight we will lift the lid on what really has been going on here for thousands of years. Following on from my Russia with Love series, and more recently the theory that the Indians in America were possibly the peoples who fled or were thrown out of the Garden of Eden in India, which is why they're called Indians, and the Kali Ma dark mother worship and the sacrificing of the peoples. Something else got me thinking that may or not be correct, depends on your own opinions, but it certainly at this point appears to fit in with what went on in that region at a later date. What if along the way of the exodus out of the Garden of Eden, some of those discarded did go north out of India, as the others who were exiled went west towards Egypt? The ones who went north over a period of time raised a vast army, because if you go north out of India you will reach the land now known as Mongolia, which is famous for the wars further north and west of that region and the entity known as Genghis Khan, who went on various conquests against all and sundry, we are led to believe, but I suspect now to be only against one peoples only, the Rus and the Slavonic Aryans. The name Khan is the Asian spelling of the name Cohen, C-O-H-E-N. Cohen being of the Ashkenazi Jewish line and related to Noah, he who, let's not forget, was given the heads up about the flood from the so-called gods, of which I believe Noah was from that group. So we had the Khazarian Jews who fled west. Well, they weren't fled, they were exiled. And the Ashkenazi Jews who went north, and their leader in the 1200s was Genghis Khan, who it is suspected was not fully human, given some of his exploits and antics. Genghis Khan attacked the north and what we're told was the so-called barbarians. The reality is those barbarians were far more advanced than any other being on this planet ever. And the reality is, due to several attacks over time, as well as the Khan-Cohen group, it was the Rus who built the so-called Great Wall of China, not the Chinese. Is there evidence that backs this up? Yes. The defence posts are facing the wrong way for it to have been built by the Chinese. Oops. That evidence can be found all along the wall. Also look at the construction of it and match it with the other construction around the world. It is Rus or Tartarian, most of which has been attributed to the Greeks or Romans, but most of them were built long before their construction period. Cohen or Khan and his army also went west to follow the Khazarian route also, and he landed in Iran, known as the land of the Aryans. Why would a group from Mongolia go so far west to attack that one country? Look at the distance on the map. It's near 3,000 miles. It would be a massive undertaking now, never mind back then. So Khan arrived in Nishapur in Iran, which is close to Urartu, and Nishapur, which is on Lake Urmia, or Urmia, all close to the Caucasian mountains, which means white. R2 and Lake Urmia is the clue, like the Al Mountains and the original Jerusalem, which was Jerusalem, which was in Russia. Iran was an region. Means the originals or the earliest. Now, in one day, Cohen slaughtered 1,768,000 people in Nishapur in the land of the Aryans. You heard that right. 1.75 million in a day. And a place that's not too far away from the original Kingdom of Manna, which was also in Iran, funny enough. But do you think it's possible for a load of people on horseback with spears, bow and arrows and swords to kill 1.75 million in one day as recorded? No. Khan had advanced weaponry and was given help by the dark forces off and in world. Is the more common sense thinking answer. To many that will be seen as not possible. Oh, that's 800 years ago. It's not possible, that technology. But that is because they only think advanced weaponry is a last century invention. It's not. When archaeological evidence right across the Middle East shows extensive radioactive fallout layers in the past, proving a nuclear war thousands of years ago. And the little known fact that Russia was attacked by nuclear weapons in 1812. Oops. Could well tell a different story. The ones who were exiled out of the Garden of Eden, modern day India, to Egypt, it appears at the same time as the rise of the cult of Amun-Ra. Same time. Again, they are Hebrew deities. Amun means the hidden. And this entity, who wasn't even here in form at any stage, is worshipped by most religions, and you end the prayer with Amen. Again, Amun-Ra followers did rituals and sacrifices of the people, just as they did back in India. And it spread throughout the world. And here's the kicker. Amun-Ra came from the Mount Zion region, which is where the modern day term Zionist came from. Hence the book, which the system tries to deny exists, but in reality does, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Remember I mentioned it earlier, to remember it? Which is a book about Jewish world domination. It's all there if you look and connect the dots. But Jewish is the latest label used, designed to create divide and conquer. Replace Jew with forces of the dark where necessary. The modern day owner of King Solomon's ring is the Rothschilds. Jewish, and a family with the most reptilian Draco DNA. What's on Rothschild's ring? A 6-pointed star. Which country is represented by the 6-pointed star? Israel. Except the Star of David, as it is called, came not from Israel, but Egypt. Amun-Ra people, formerly the Kali-Ma people in India. Early scholars and researchers reciting ancient books all state King Solomon was of Egypt, not Israel. It didn't exist. And the fact that if you do a search for ancient Egyptian Seal of Solomon brings up straight away 6 discounting articles straight off the bat before observing the evidence suggests a cover-up for me, because it is. And a quote, "In retrospect, the 6-pointed star was an Egyptian occult symbol which King Solomon adopted when he went into idolatry and witchcraft and built an altar for Ashtaroth." Now, what I do know, privately, it was King Solomon's love for Ashtaroth that led to his descent into the dark magic realms. Look at the pictures of Solomon's ring. On both sides of the 6-pointed star, there's an Egyptian headdress. It's not Israel. These Egyptians and later Israelites were the Kali-Ma peoples from India, who then went on a world domination scheme, desecrating all things white, all things Rus, and all things Aryan, using, in our modern day terms, first they all but killed most of the Rus in Russia, 1919 through 45, then set about creating their next stage of operation, the country of Germany, which also contained Aryan people, and was used as a vehicle in World War II, creating the division of Aryan peoples between Russia, the Rus, and the Aryans, the Germans. Get them fighting each other, kill 2 birds with one stone. You see the picture now. That war led to the creation of the State of Israel, and then on to America. After the end of the war, via Project Paperclip and the Nazis, which is National Zionism, not German at all, but the Kali-Ma peoples. This is a global problem, and has got nothing to do with Israel, the country, or the majority of its people. We've all been duped. But look at this passage for a clue as to who these people are. Acts 7:37 through 43. This is that Moses to whom our fathers would not obey, but thrust him from them, and in their hearts turned back again into Egypt. And they made a calf in those days. And this is my comment. Calf is bull, as in Bible, as in Baphomet, which is also represented by the 6-pointed star. And they offered sacrifices unto the idol, and rejoiced in the works of their own hands. Same people. Then God turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, as is written in the book of the prophets. Quote unquote, O ye house of Israel, have you offered to me slain beasts and sacrifices by the space of 40 years in the wilderness? Yea, ye took up the tabernacle of Moloch, and the star of your god Remphan, figures which ye made to worship them, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. Now the key parts to that is, it says the house of Israel. Not the country of Israel, the house. It didn't say the house of Egypt, did it? There is a distinction. It was a house, like the House of Orange, the House of Bavaria, the House of Habsburgs, Saxe, Coburg, Gotha. These are all what's now known as the royal bloodline group. And the House of Israel is the house of Isis and Ra. Is Ra El. El means God. Like it says, you made figures which ye made to worship them. Isis and Ammon Ra, out of Egypt. The worship of these Satanists goes on today with the worship of Moloch in the Bohemian Grove. The House of Rothschilds, with their Ring of Solomon, moved to a new base in Switzerland. Switzer means twin sisters, as in Isis. Jesus, they say, is the King of the Jews. But what is inscribed on the cross? IHS. Isis, Horus, and Set, as in Satan, as in Satan. The six-pointed star is a representation of Yahweh, which also represents Saturn. Who do the Jewish people worship now? Yahweh. Can you all see the picture now? There is a global worship of the Black Virgins, also called the Black Madonnas, which is the Black Mother, the Kali Ma. And its origin is unknown to the researcher who wrote this piece. Quote, whoever the enigmatic Black Virgin may be, she holds a powerful attraction for her millions of devotees around the world. Her sacred sites stand on highly charged earth energy centers, enhanced by megalithic ley lines and sacred architecture. Unquote. This is how the Kali Ma and their sacrificial aligned followers reached a critical mass. They took over all of the earth grids of source charged energies and replaced it with their dark force energies. This is how all the tribal peoples in the past and current, some of them, ended up playing the sacrifice ritual games. It appears throughout history now, starting 110,000 years ago with the Rus text, not the Vedic text, that's commonly associated with India. It's not Indian. It came from the Rus and the Aryans who travelled south and east. The original teachings distorted into the Vedics, religion and human sacrifice, which later morphed into the modern day religion of Hinduism. So throughout history, the peoples of Rus have been targeted more than any other peoples or nation on this planet. And the question is, why? Why did the off-world beings target them 110,000 years ago and destroy the whole continent of the Arya? Why did the Ashkenazi Jews and Khan or Cohen try to eliminate them in the 1200s? Why was Tartaria on every map in the 14th and 15th centuries almost get eliminated from history? Who dropped nuclear weapons on them in the 1800s? Why did the Khazarian Jews try to eliminate them in the 1900s with the fake Bolshevik Revolution? And why is there a global propaganda against them that all things Russian are bad, when adversely there's a global propaganda to not critique or question in any way the country of Israel or its religion or its people. You see, there is a direct connection. When the Rus and Aryan peoples brought us so much knowledge and enlightenment, far more than any other group on this planet ever, it's not what they wanted. Northern parts of Russia still to this day have a much higher vibration than anywhere else on the planet. That is not supposition, that is actually fact, based on the reports of the people I've spoken to who have all been there. Perhaps it was they who were the real teachers here. It was they who delivered the real person and teacher known as Jesus, but whose real name was Radomir. And it was they who produced the blonde-haired, blue-eyed person known as Mary Magdalene. Both were hunted to death by the Roman Catholic Church, aligned with their demonic worship masters. One day the real story will be revealed. But if we keep ignoring the real genocide on this planet, that it's not blacks or Jews or religious persecution, but the Aryan people and their descendants, then those real teachings and the teachers will ultimately be lost forever. Next piece. As an addition to the above pieces just done, and also the piece I did on last Friday of the overtaking and elimination of the whites, here is a piece by a Jewish person named Israel Cohen, that name again, said back in 1912, again during the time period I mentioned in the last show. Quote, "We must realise that our party's most powerful weapon is racial tensions. By propounding into the consciousness of the dark races that for centuries they have been oppressed by whites, we can mould them into the program of the Communist Party. We will invest to instill in the whites a guilt complex over their exploitation of the Negroes. We will aid the Negroes to rise in prominence in every walk of life, in the professions and in the world of sports and entertainment. With this prestige, the Negro will be able to intermarry with the whites and begin a process which will deliver America to our cause." Unquote. Seeing the picture now? Breaking that piece down confirms all that I wrote about in the series From Russia with Love. 1. Blacks mixing with whites for an agenda. Back then it was to boost voodoo magic. Now it's similar with an added political agenda. 2. Confirms the Communist Party is nothing to do with Russia and nothing to do with China and everything to do with the Khazarian and Ashkenazi Jews. Tells you there, our party's most powerful, we can mould them into the program of the Communist Party. 3. Look at all the top American sports people now and also in entertainment. Aren't most black, which is fine in and of itself. No problem with that. But how many are there because of this program instead of their talent is the questions we have to ask. 4. Confirming their takedown and takeover of America. It's all there in your faces. They are their words, not mine, and begin a process which will deliver America to our cause. 5. All divide and conquer. Our party's most powerful weapon is racial tensions. And before any half-witted retard thinks of shouting racist or anti-Semitic, think again. They are using black and Jewish people here in a program that they are totally unaware of, and one which they did not consent to. In essence, they're pawns in their insidious game. So how did they do it? Final piece. Simple. They took over the media and launched propaganda. The first newspapers, then radio, then television, and finally cable, and onto the internet. And here is a quote by the same guy who introduced dumbing down education in America. And for those new to this group, education means training of animals. Which religious book declares all people except them are animals? The Talmud. Like the previous guy said, and begin a process which will deliver America to our cause in 1912. Henry Ford, back in 1920, quote, controlling the world's sources of news, Jews can always prepare the minds of the people for their next moves. The greatest exposure has yet to be made is the way the news is manufactured. This was 1920, fake news then. And the way in which the minds of whole nations is moulded for a purpose. Take note of that. When the powerful Jew is at last traced and his hand revealed, then comes the ready cry of persecution, and it echoes through the world's press. The real causes of persecution, which is the oppression of the peoples by the financial practice of the Jews, are never given publicity, unquote. So there was Henry Ford, near 100 years ago, telling you the news is faked. How they mould whole nations into a belief system that they created. How the world has been financially hijacked by these Khazarian psychopaths operating for and by the Talmud, in which all peoples not abiding by that book are essentially a piece of shit under their shoe. These are the human embodiments, and in fact, in some cases, not, from the Draco and the Anunnaki line. Both are known as the Chosen Ones. Both operated under the divide and conquer rule, and both operate in the sleight of hand and hidden realms. As a side note, was it possibly the case that Hitler exposed the Khazarian Jews in the 1930s and 40s? He did not say who was the issue. Did he not say who was the issue then? The Jewish bankers. So the line used by Henry Ford, when the powerful Jew is at last traced and his hand revealed, then comes the ready cry of persecution, and it echoes throughout the world's press, unquote. Hence the Jewish persecution narrative was rolled out with the 6 million Jews figure, which was mentioned 138 times in the press between 1880 and 1941. There's that timeline again, mentioned in last week's show. is it not? These are not Jewish at all. These are the Kalimar people who have blighted this planet for over 110,000 years. And for us to really prosper here, they must be exposed. The light needs to shine on these cockroaches and the issue dealt with once and for all, preferably in a non-violent way. We do not have to plunge to the despicable levels these anti-human parasites have, and I hope one day to see all the Jewish peoples rise up and expose it also. They have been pawns in a game that was not of their own making. This completes the cycle of my Russia with Love series in many aspects. It's all there, right in your face, and you can choose to ignore it or hide behind the racism card or face up to reality. The dark forces have been against the Urs, meaning the originals, from as far back as 110,000 years. 7,500 years ago was the destruction of the Aryan Atlantis. 5,000 years ago there was another conflict in the original Garden of Eden. 1,000 years ago they killed Radomir and ultimately Mary Magdalene, both of which were Rus Aryan and quite possibly part of the Urs teachers who came from the Ursa Minor constellation. 800 years ago, with Cohen did another mass ritual sacrifice on the Rus and the Aryans. In the 1500s, the Catholic Church was torturing and murdering another Urs teacher, Anna, and also wiping out the Cathars, and also attempting to kill off Mary and Radomir's offspring line. In 1800s, the nuclear bombing of Russia. In the 1900s, deleting the Tsar's line, except not all were eliminated. In the 1900s again, brought the loss of 70 to 90 million Rus. They then created communism that has got nothing to do with Russia and everything to do with these people known as the Jews. And as stated by the Israel-Cohen piece, they then went on to the Slavonic regions, including Germany, and eliminated many of them also. Played the Aryan race card that all whites are only supremacists, when if you go back to 5,000 years ago, the Rus Aryans all came in peace to teach, not to destroy or eliminate. Then came the fake Cold War, which was against communism, we were told, and yet China wasn't included. Except the Israel-Cohen piece proves communism is a Jewish propaganda machine, not Russian, not Chinese, or Vietnamese, or Cuban for that matter. And now we have the propaganda in the Portal People news of Russian collusion. In the meantime, the white population has gone from 30+% down to 12 in less than 100 years. If NATO, which is an anagram of Aton, another Egyptian god, quote unquote, and no, that's not a coincidence either. If NATO has its way, that 12% will plunge to the point of extinction. Who are NATO? Always ready to attack? Russia. Like I said in the last show, where are the Save the Whites banners, memes, charities or groups? Oh, they do exist, but they are branded by the dark forces think tank groups as right-wing, fascist, supremacist, violent and hate-filled groups, so the public turn away from it. And as a reminder of what Henry Ford stated, quote, "and the way in which the minds of whole nations is moulded for a purpose," unquote. And you begin to see how it all plays out. Israel was moulded and set up as that nation to carry the banner. But these psychopaths are in every nation, not just Israel. These people are not Jews, Jewish or Israelis at all. They are dark forces, the Kali Ma people and the Amun-Ra forces of evil, desecrating the whole of humanity with their satanic propensity to dabble in the dark arts, produce mass genocide and the most heinous levels of crime ever. But a final reminder, if you're hating on all Jews or Jewish for this, your thinking is at portal people rhetoric level. In other words, beyond stupid. Find out the real truth behind it. And the vast majority of peoples known as Jews have been lied to, played for fools, and used as pawns in the worst game this planet has ever witnessed. We need to embrace those people. Teach them, not denigrate them. Just like the Urs, the Rus, and the Aryans did all those years ago. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now.